one of the ways that governments possibly could divide people is by, causing the situation where there's great injustice between the rich and the poor, so that the rich always want to strike out at the poor, and the poor always want to strike out at the rich. And once there's that division, and it creates this den of the damned, where they're all just kind of going at each other, then the horror lord that judges between them is able to, have this system of so-called justice, where really it's an injustice, and is able to perpetuate itself. So that the rich are able to continually, blame the poor, and the poor are able to continually blame the rich. And so it's one type of division, but what the horror lord will not want is he'll not want another type of division, the type of division that causes them to be just frankly unproductive for his purposes. They should be, in his view, united for his purposes, united entirely for his purposes. And so, if I'm the horror lord, I want everybody to be united in serving me, but I want them to be divided in investing their talents in one another, so that they have to rely upon me to basically control their separate environments, to keep them distinctly different. So they can't unite, so they can't, form an organization that would have such a unity that it would actually be able to survive on its own without the need of me. See, if that happened, if people developed the skills that they needed to act as a planned organization through democratic processes to create well-reasoned plans of action and decisions that would work, like a co-op would be, where people could understand their talents and they would be wise as to their application of those talents given what everybody else has as a talent, and that people would just kind of fit right into the puzzle and know what their part is, and actually act in that way. And there wouldn't be a need for the horror lord, because people would quite frankly just connect themselves to each other and have a working, functioning society. And quite frankly, that's what the horror lord would hate. That's what the horror lord would not want at all, because he wouldn't want his power to go away. And so when we look at these kind of ideas, these kind of organizations, we can see that they can become a very powerful threat to demonic strongholds. When people themselves can actually develop in such a way that they can just plug themselves right in, so to speak, and collectively function as an organized body, knowing what each other's parts are and not envying each other, but instead, through love, fitting themselves right in. Then, quite frankly, when you have that organization and you have it working well, then it is just one more nail in the coffin of the devil. That's right. And so the question is, how do you create that kind of organization that would do those kind of things? Cause people to have a knowledge and awareness of the talents that they have and how those talents can work well with the talents that other people have in basic, patterns of connectivity, in order to have a strong structure in society. And that is really the big question. It's the big question that we all should ask. It's a question that we should think about seriously. Because if we could solve that one problem, then we would be able to solve many of the problems that occur in government, in business, in churches, in educational institutions, in any organization that has to have a evil demonic ringleader. Now, what would be just as good, perhaps, is if the leaders of organizations were genuinely interested in connecting people to people for the sake of those individuals thriving for their own sake. You know, if that were the case, you would have somebody that would be patterning society, creating communities of people in such a way that the guy that's creating those communities is doing it just because he's gifted at doing that, and not because necessarily he has a material gain to do that. Now, if these kind of people could be developed and harnessed, let's say develop business leaders from churches to act this way, to be able to go out and to be able to see the talents that other people have, and to be able to integrate people with people, to create organizations, to create churches, to create schools, to create various sorts of institutions that would then go out and serve other people. And not necessarily that these organizations would use a hook or a lure or create a snare of the devil to entrap these people that would be part of these organizations, into not using their talents, but instead, abusing their talents to serve this warlord. If it wasn't like that, but it was just the case that you had people that genuinely just connected people to people and fit things together like a big puzzle master or something. And if these people could be developed to do that, through research and study, of the science of the talents, then quite frankly, it would transform society. There would never be an issue, per se, of not having enough jobs in society. There wouldn't be an issue of social injustice, because people would be fitting in right where they need to go. And the guy that would be doing this kind of activity would be very godly in doing it, because this is one of the ministries, per se, that God does. So it'd be, let's say, the ministry of maybe Christ to, as the potter, to actually mold people according to the design that Christ has. That design being the most ideal design. And when you have this kind of activity, it really it causes there to be a growth in wealth, and wealth not just for one person, but wealth for all people. And so instead of just one person becoming more and more wealthy because everybody's serving him and serving his interests, instead everybody becomes more and more wealthy because they're using their talents the way that they're designed to use their talents, and investing those talents into other people, so that those people could then go and invest their talents into other people, so that it sort of becomes like a rug that becomes knitted together more and more tightly, just more and more interwoven. Interwoven to the point where it can't be broken. And when you get that kind of organization, then there wouldn't be as much of a need for arms. There wouldn't be a need for policing, because those people that do intercession, those people that make adjustments for other people in order for the talents to be more fully or most fully invested, those people would be able to understand and know each individual, and they would be able to even act as protectors of the community. When you get this kind of activity going, then it becomes sort of like the kingdom on earth. It becomes a Zionic atmosphere. Just the opposite of what the whorelord would want. And when we see the activity of the early church with Jesus Christ and his ministry on earth, it was the case that Jesus Christ didn't just get a whole bunch of people together and say, oh, let's go off into this big building somewhere and talk. I'm just going to give you a sermon and talk about stuff. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was the case that he was actually out among the people. They were centered all around him, and he caused them to be fit into this giant puzzle, so to speak. He would have been more like somewhat of a puzzle master that would have fit people into his organization. You know, he would have taken the 12 disciples and called them, you know, brought them forth, put them together, and created this organization with them. Then they were supposed to go out and take, you know, these other people and fit them into the same, you know, sort of organization, make the kingdom of God bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's quite a bit different than calling everybody out, you know, into some big building, you know, where they're away from their natural habitat, so to speak, away from where they would normally be using their talents, and to give them a lecture or something.